For years, I struggled to look in the mirror. I'd catch the grimace on my face, which would morph into anything from mild to stomach-turning disgust at the sight of my unflattering expression, ill-fitting clothes, or hair out of place. The mirror in the primary bedroom was the worst. It was directly opposite a window, letting in every ounce of unflattering natural light and illuminating every flaw in high definition. It didn't matter that I didn't think I looked so bad in the more generously lit mirror in my own bedroom. In my mind, this was the only mirror that told the truth. Illuminated every horrible thing that was visible and invisible about me. I'd swallow the shame and sadness like a peach pit in my throat, suppress the rolling nausea in my stomach, avert my teary eyes, and walk out to begin or continue my day. These brief interludes of self-hatred, a medicinal dose of self-judgment, were the norm and aren't unfamiliar to most people. As human beings, we fail to see ourselves in totality and in context of our being. Acknowledging the inherent flaws and fragility in our humanity, not as some character flaw, but a commonplace part of our design that affects all of us, allows us to have the perspective that our mistakes and our stumbling, our struggles, aren't because we're uniquely broken, but because we're human, and a lot of us are dealing with the same things. When you contextualize your feelings of shame, it loses some of its potency because shame thrives in isolation and convinces you are a uniquely flawed and especially messed up person, worthy of the contempt you or others feel for yourself, instead of the alternative, that you are just being human and trying your best like everyone else. And maybe you actually don't have to be so hard on yourself. You haven't failed at being a decent human being. You're actually experiencing it. Self-love isn't an A to B process. It's a winding road and it's a journey. Don't expect to go from one extreme, self-hate or disregard, to its polar opposite, self-love. So you can relax. I'm not going to ask you to start making kissy faces in the mirror and start feeling truly madly deeply for yourself overnight. That just isn't reasonable or possible. When you're dealing with the extremes of self-hate and dislike, asking you to conjure up love for yourself right here and now is just overwhelming and pointless. Often, and in my experience, the issue with self-hate isn't that you simply don't like yourself. It's that you feel and think you're simply, fundamentally, the worst out of everybody. And that makes the idea and the act of self-love inert. People often struggle to love themselves because they think in order to do so, they have to be their idea of what is lovable. For some, it's close to perfect. For others, it only seems possible if they become everything they are not. Someone else. I'm here to tell you that's not necessary. In fact, perfectionism and self-aggrandizing actually stand in the way of loving yourself, because they require you to perform, to achieve a type of good, better personhood that, I'm here to tell you, just doesn't exist. Loving yourself only when you become a certain kind of person or reach a certain goal isn't love. It's conditional acceptance. And there's always a new condition waiting to be applied in the mind of someone that doesn't like themselves, because you already believe you're not good enough and will find more reasons why. What you first need to come to terms with before you even consider one day the possibility of even liking yourself is to entertain the idea that you're just not that bad. Self-hatred has a slippery and effective way of convincing us we're uniquely messed up, stupid, incompetent, unlovable, that there is something in us, and only us, that renders us fundamentally wretched, despicable, and unlikable. Some of you may have felt like this since you were children, as early as you can remember even. That was also my experience. What you need to come to terms with is that you're not all these things. You're not uniquely wretched, you are simply human. With all the imperfections, the insecurities and intrusive thoughts, the moments of embarrassment and lack of understanding. You are not a monster or a hidden beast hiding in plain sight waiting to be found out by humanity, like some kind of undercover Frankenstein's monster. You are just you. A human, like all the other humans around you. You have to come to terms with the fact that everyone deals with a complex set of emotions and a shifting sense of identity daily. Things they wish they did and didn't do, achievements and regrets, missed opportunities and failed relationships, things that make us inexplicably happy for no concrete reason, things that make us laugh, and things that piss us off. We all shit and fart, we all burp, we all feel embarrassed, we all want to be accepted and liked by people we like. We all wish we could change something, many things about ourselves. We have all been through something unpleasant to varying degrees. We will all get sick. We will all injure ourselves to lesser and greater degrees. We all have cried. We are all scared of something. We have all felt weak or powerless at one point. We have all lied, even about something stupid, whether we remember it or not. We are all trying to figure it out and make sense of it all. We all are affected by relationships, politics, economy, air pollution, the weather, something. All of us. Failure, as well as achievement, are inevitable, as are falling short of the expectations you have of yourself and others, all of which don't make us worthy of hate, but rather of careful and realistic patience and consideration. The human condition is reliably unchanging, repetitive, flexible, and imperfect, and ripe for figuring out how to live with that and still get what we want and need out of life and our limited time on Earth. Acknowledging this isn't giving yourself a license to slip into some kind of self-pitying slacker mentality, as some people think it does. It actually does the opposite. It makes you more able to withstand your imperfections and mistakes and move on from it rather than stay stuck in a place of dislike and despair, of thinking how awful a person you are and how you'll never amount to anything good. If you're able to acknowledge the tricky and unpleasant parts of your humanity, as well as the pleasant, and not see it as a moral and personal failure, but as a part of your design, an inevitability that will happen, but can also be accounted for and overcome, you're much better able to, instead of give up, to make the choice instead, to try again. When we have an unbalanced view of our humanity, our brain conjures up our own special brand of doubt and opposition. I like to think of them as a trio of monsters. The monsters of should, could, and would plague us. Should, could, and would are always past tense. Should have, could have, would have. Because the point is that you have already failed. It's in the past, and they are here to belittle you and affirm your low self-worth. That what you could, should, and would have done are already out of your reach. The point of should, could, and would isn't to provide you with constructive alternatives and plans to do better, presently or in the future. The point is to make you feel bad about yourself. We beat ourselves up with all the ideas of who we should be, could be, and would be if we had just been born differently, chosen differently, not done this or that when we were reckless or bookish teenagers. Should, could, and would work as a gang. And their objective is always to make you reach the same conclusion, that you are unworthy, undeserving, and unlovable. And they'll mentally beat you as hard as they can until you give in to that conclusion. Should, could, and would have a boss who's in charge of their whole operation. Their boss is perfectionism. Perfectionism is untouchable, unattainable, so the bar remains forever too high for you to reach, and always gives you more grounds to criticize yourself for when you fall short. In that environment, should, could, and would flourish. The thing about those of us who suffer with self-dislike or hatred is that absolutes and extremes run rampant in our thoughts and opinions of ourselves. We are often either all good or all bad, depending on the circumstances and mood that day. We assume almost everyone is better than us in some way, and that we are forever marked to fail and flounder through life as an evil imposter hiding amongst the common folk. I joke slightly, but it's true for many of you, that self-hatred has stripped you of your sense of personhood. Have you ever felt slightly inhuman, dirty, a little too flawed to think of yourself with compassion? Ever felt like an animal or a creature among men, hiding in person clothes, and nothing but an ugly mess underneath, waiting in fear constantly that someone might find you out? Find you out to be what exactly? Imperfect. These kinds of extremes need to be balanced. It's why jumping from the extreme of self-hate to self-love is unrealistic, because what that misses are the steps in between. The pivotal foundation and healthy middle ground of fine and good enough. To the self-hater or self-disliker, there is no category for good enough, because perfection is the standard by which our distorted self-view judges us by. It might seem rudimentary, but it has to be a priority to first acknowledge and internalize that perfection doesn't exist. Perfection isn't a human trait. It doesn't make you a bad person for being imperfect. It makes you a person. We are all inherently imperfect, so reaching perfection isn't possible. So where does that leave us? With the truth of our humanity, that we will never be perfect, but there is room in our being to just be good enough. A good enough human doesn't deserve to be berated and mistreated. There's no justification for it. They are not all good nor all bad. They are simply doing what all human beings are doing, attempting to live life with the circumstances they've been given. Good enough. Can we consider that the distorted and unpleasant view of ourselves might also be the opposite extreme of that unattainable perfection we think we need to strive for? Neither of these two options are realistic. Neither take your humanity into account. The truth is, when you understand your humanity, the fragility and humility, the inherent and lifelong flaws that come with it, you begin to understand that you, like everyone else, are just doing the best with the set of circumstances, parents, socioeconomic backgrounds, jobs and environment we've been dealt. That any number of us, if we had been born in a different place, to different people, a different time period, we would be living a very different and unrecognizable life. We would be different, but we're not. We are who we are, as we currently are now. If you dislike yourself, the idea of loving yourself, of ever feeling less than awful, is an overwhelming prospect that can make you feel a range of things. But often our conditional view of what it means to love ourselves means we can only do so if we reach a perfected ideal of ourselves, which isn't attainable. And this makes us stuck between the reality of inherent imperfection and our desire to still somehow reach our idea of perfection, the state of being we think will make us happy. What I'm asking you to do is let go of the shiny idea you have in your mind of who you should be. Let go of should, could, and would, your SCWs, because those don't help you move forward. They keep you stuck. Similarly, what I'm asking you to begin to consider in this episode and with this week's task is that you're not the opposite extreme either. You're not perfect, but you're also not totally awful. You're somewhere in the middle, and that's okay. That's good. That makes you human. Continually striving toward high and unattainable expectations of yourself keep you from taking clear stock of reality, where you are, who you are, and what you've got. And you need to do that in order to implement real and lasting change. Change to be the person you want to be. You need to acknowledge your humanity because you need to understand that mistakes are a natural and inevitable part of life and development. You can't judge yourself by this metric of being the worst, because what that does is make the idea of getting back up again, of trying again, seem pointless, because you tell yourself it's not just that you made a mistake or are learning and can try again, but the issue is that you are uniquely wrong and everything you do fails anyway. So why try? See the difference? That isn't going to cut it. Not if you want to one day be able to love yourself. You can't love a false version of yourself because that leads to feeling like an imposter. It would feel disingenuous to you to start thinking of yourself as the polar opposite of the negative view you've had for yourself for years. To ignore your flaws and pretend your mistakes don't matter to you. Self-love is owning the truth. A balanced, humbling, and encouraging truth of the reality of who you are within the context of your tricky but simultaneously amazing humanity. Loving yourself is only possible if you're able to reconcile and become comfortable with a real, balanced, and fair version of yourself, filtered through the lens of who you are, the full spectrum of your humanity, not through the cracked and distorted lens of your mistakes and deficiencies. That just isn't fair. You need to realize, as someone who dislikes themselves, that your internal mirror is shattered. Its shattering can be down to many things. Things we'll go more into detail about eventually. It could be parents, friends or frenemies, bullies, media, the workplace, any multitude of pressure and expectations that influence the should, could and would of who you think you should be, who you have been taught you should be. Anything that is other than yourself. Trauma, adverse childhood experiences, abuse and addiction adds another crack in the internal mirror, until the whole thing is so smashed, you can't see yourself clearly. I want to propose to you that you might not be seeing yourself clearly in the haze of your self-hatred, and instead of first offering you all the reasons why you're just amazing and so worth it and go get 'em, tiger, no. To instead point out the cracks, the distortions in the final image you're seeing of yourself, and point to the very real and not that bad human being underneath. Does that sound familiar? Maybe it's happened to you, maybe you've seen it happen to someone else. You spill a glass or lose your keys or wallet or something else. You forget something important or something not that important, but it matters to you anyway. And as soon as your mishap has registered, the mental onslaught of criticism begins. You idiot, it usually says. I'm so stupid, I never get anything right, I always mess up. I'll never be a normal human being. What is wrong with me? And before you know it, you've spiraled down into this disproportionately aggressive self-denigration over something objectively quite unimportant. Notice how these thoughts often deal in absolutes. Much like should, could and would, they bombard you with the weapons of always, never and forever, of your character and destiny. They are unbalanced and unkind. They don't account for your humanity. They don't offer you the perspective that it is very normal for human beings to be forgetful, clumsy and at times careless, that it doesn't make them or you awful and unworthy of ever receiving kindness and goodness ever again. No. These thoughts are purposefully isolating, focusing on your flaws and how uniquely awful they are. That out of all the people in the world, you must be the most forgetful, clumsy, careless and stupid, and for that you deserve all the bad things that come to you, especially feeling bad about yourself. You often hear people who are encouraging you to be nice to yourself say, you wouldn't treat your friend like that, or that you should be kind and talk to yourself like a friend. When things like this happen, the problem with this when you're dealing with entrenched self-hatred is the difference in how you would react to a friend's mishap, mistake or moral failure versus your own. The difference is that you like your friends and you don't like yourself, and that means talking to yourself like a friend is only going to feel disingenuous and fake, which adds fuel to the fire of the disrespect you already have for yourself, and you're less likely to carry on trying. This is because if you dislike yourself, your internal locus of evaluation is off. Your locus of evaluation is the term coined by American psychologist Carl Rogers. He says it is that which people refer to in order to make judgments about themselves, others, and the world. Locus is Latin for place, so the term describes the place from which a person makes a value judgment. Your internal locus of evaluation is like the due north on a compass. When you hate yourself, your due north, what everything always points to is observing and finding proof that you are a bad person and deserving of the hate or dislike you feel towards yourself. Your compass and your process of evaluating yourself, your worth and value, your positive and negative attributes is skewed towards confirming your lack of value and goodness. And it can be relentless. Sometimes that voice or those thoughts that surge and attack you are externalized. The negative critical comments get projected onto someone else. They sound like this. They must think you're an idiot for doing that. Look now, she thinks you're an embarrassing person, or he must think you look so ugly right now. This type of criticism tries to legitimize itself by jumping out of your own mind and into the mind of others. acting as a mind reader for those around you and how much they must and most certainly think you're foul or an idiot. Don't fall for it. All these assumptions, this feeling that those around you must only be able to see the bad in you, stems directly from your own thoughts about yourself, from your locus of evaluation. It assumes because you think or feel stupid, embarrassed, ugly, etc., that others must think the same about you, even if and when most likely they don't think that at all. Positive compliments, praise, and acknowledgement alternatively are received as lies or with skepticism. They must just be saying that to be nice. None of the good things about me they say are true. Again, do you see the absolutes and extremes here? The belief that somehow you can't be simultaneously a bit awful sometimes, but still have good attributes that don't cancel out one another. This balanced view doesn't serve self-hatred, because the locus of evaluation is off, and constantly searching for its due north of you being bad, stupid, wrong, and when it fails to get you to think those things about yourself, it tries to recruit others around you to help. And this is why self-love plays a very important part of healthy emotional connection as well as resilience when it comes to interacting with others. Because on the occasion where someone does think you're wrong or stupid, it's not healthy or sustainable for that to rock your world the way it does when you already feel badly about yourself. Your worst nightmare confirmed. You've been found out. You're more likely to believe and internalize negative evaluations of yourself, even if they're not true, if you already think badly of yourself. And no one, absolutely no one, should have that kind of power over you and your sense of worth, your value, your deservedness of love. If you assume every person that does criticize or mock, ridicule or hate you is right and justified in doing so, you have given the right to judge your worth and value to someone else. And that's playing a very dangerous game because that was never meant to be their responsibility. Nor should you entrust that to someone else who can decide one day they may adore you and the next day you don't deserve happiness or kindness, or worse, that you don't deserve to live. That may seem dramatic, but we see it online all the time. Nobody should ever have that power over you, your quality of life, or your right to live happily. No one but you. Imagine a point in your life where somebody does criticize you unfairly, unkindly, calls you all the names you've called yourself, and instead of taking it in and letting it fester and torment you, you are able to access your internal sense of worth and value, the truth, and say, no, you're entitled to your opinion, but I know that's not true about me, and truly know it and believe it. That is what I want for you. And the only way to do that is to learn to love yourself first, to fix your internal locus of evaluation that's set to self-hate, and begin to grow healthy respect and value for yourself the sustainable way. Rather than try and dive headfirst into blind adoration for yourself, begin on neutral ground, with yourself as you are, just a human being. Not that great and not that bad either. Acknowledging this is the basis and beginning of building a more balanced equilibrium, one centered on truth and respect, not disproportionate criticism or egotistical self-aggrandizing. To continue on the friendship comparison, most of us didn't start out speaking to our friends the way we do now. The affection, the closeness, the love grows. It didn't start that way. Imagine if it had, if you professed undying love and extolled all your friends' virtues and promised to never acknowledge their faults from day one. You'd be viewed as weird and promptly dropped before a friendship could even begin. The relationship you build with yourself is the same. The thing about those of us who struggle with self-esteem and therefore pay a lot of attention to our own behaviour and the behaviour of others is that we have a pretty good bullshit detector, and that includes when it comes to ourselves. So fakery, self-aggrandizing, sugarcoating is only going to make us feel sick, and worse than that, painfully disingenuous. And that's never a good place to start any relationship. So what I am suggesting is the fundamental and simple building blocks of neutrality. It's a beautiful thing. Not perfection, not irredeemable imperfection, but balanced and realistic middle ground of being neither, of creating more space for the possibility that with inherent imperfection that we all have, it is possible to still just be enough. You can't love yourself if you don't have a balanced and realistic view of yourself. Acknowledge that you are human and that forever disqualifies you from attaining perfection. You're going to make mistakes just as much as you're going to have achievements. And in the midst of self-disliking thought patterns, you can realize the pattern, the common terms that pop up in your thoughts like should, could and would, or never, always and forever, and propose to yourself that perhaps you're not unwieldy evil and uniquely messed up and destined for ostracization and failure. You're just human. You're just trying. You don't always get it right. You won't always get it right, and neither does anyone else. And that's okay, because it's a part of living as a human being. So what's the point of beating yourself up for it? Why not just keep going and try again? See, that's the thing about your internal criticism. It never really sets you up to achieve the things it wants you to achieve. The reason why it's best not to listen to those kinds of thoughts is that they are actually counterproductive. Like I said earlier, the point of those thoughts isn't to push you to actually accomplish anything. The purpose is to make you feel bad about yourself. So when that has been achieved, you are then too upset and discouraged to even want to try again or muster up the motivation to fix a mistake, real or imagined, that you might have made, which again makes you feel bad about yourself all over again, and the cycle continues. So it's important to notice when those thoughts begin, because they can be subtle or heavy-handed, and they can carry on forever if unchecked, and they are not helping you. So it's important you learn how to get them out of your way. What this is called is thought interruption. It's a form of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. It is developing awareness of the kinds of thoughts and spirals that lead you down to the pit, and practicing gently questioning the validity of the bold and absolute claims these self-despising thoughts make. You hold them up to scrutiny and judge them based on a flexible and manageable reality, not self-hating absolutes. Begin to consider that you may not be as bad as you think you are, and that's actually a great place to start, rather than launching yourself into a false kind of egotistical self-love that doesn't actually make room for your humanity and the inevitability of imperfection and failure along the way. You're going to make mistakes in life. You're going to do things you don't like or regret later. In this process, you're going to make mistakes and fall down and get overwhelmed. What you're doing is creating a hospitable environment for healing, fertile ground in your mental ecosystem that encourages growth and regeneration, not destruction. Our focus throughout this entire series is progression, not perfection. That creates the lush ecosystem for healthy change, where you want to see it and what you want to achieve realistically, and getting you to a point where you actually believe you can do it. Pay attention to the should, could, and would, and the never, always, and forever absolutes that crop up in your thoughts this week or throughout the day. How did you react to a mistake you made this week? When negative thoughts crop up this week, try and be aware of them and notice that they're there. When you feel ready and have recognized negative and self-critical thoughts, gently try introducing thought interruption, questioning the validity and intensity of your thoughts about yourself by reminding yourself that you're not uniquely awful and bad. You're human, and that means you need patience and encouragement to keep trying, not denigration. What you should expect from yourself, which is never absolutes, but always a mix of positives and negatives, achievements and setbacks, wins and failures, because this means that you can be resilient, that setbacks don't have to stop you in your tracks or make you give up, because you've become aware that they are a part of the process and progress of being a human being who is just trying, and you don't have to stop or get in your own way. You just have to try again. That self-neutrality and understanding pave the winding road towards self-love. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the podcast, and listener, If no one's ever told you, or if no one ever meant it, you deserve love. Now go love yourself. As always, the episode resources and references, disclaimers and social media links will be in the show notes and description. The uncensored audio podcast episodes are available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Details on how to support the podcast are also listed in the show notes and description if you feel so inclined. If you would like access to the uncensored vodcast of the episode you just watched, as well as journal prompts and reading material, this is available through Patreon membership. Sign up to the mailing list to keep up to date with what happens next with the channel and the future of the podcast. All of this information and more about us can also be found on the Scattered Seeds website. Bye.